The Edmonton Oilers fell short in the Stanley Cup Final for the second year in a row, and now they face a crucial offseason. Connor McDavid indicated he's in no hurry to sign a new contract. Nick Zararis of Locked On Oilers will talk about the impact of that and more next on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here. Welcome, everybody, to the Monday episode of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show Nick Zararis of Locked On Oilers and Locked On NHL. And, the offseason is less than a week old, and already lots of controversy surrounding the Edmonton Oilers. And maybe the biggest piece of news, Connor McDavid indicating he's in no rush to sign a new deal with the Oilers. What does this mean? How much of this is posturing, and what impact does it have on Edmonton's plans this offseason?
So the first thing I would point to is Draisaitl signed his extension, which will kick in this upcoming season in September of last year. I think very clearly the Oilers want to get this done. There's no indication McDavid is dissatisfied with his tenure in Edmonton. So my assumption is the Oilers are going to maneuver over the next week and a half. They have at least one or two moves to make as far as creating more cap space. They have several players, including Evander Kane, Victor Arvidsson, who are candidates for change of scenery, salary dump trades to create more space. McDavid is under contract for next year. I personally feel they are going to get their ducks in a row to get an understanding of what their books are going to look like next summer for whatever that McDavid extension is going to be. As far as the number itself, you do the basic math, you grab your calculator, you put in whatever the salary cap max is, you times that by 0.2, the 20% max of players allowed, and you offer that. And then the other question, and I know this has been a bit of conjecture over the last week or two in regards to Mitch Marner, it's the term, because there's a world where because the cap is going to start increasing more than just incrementally the next handful of seasons, you might stand to make a lot more money if you do 3 or 4 year deals versus 7 or 8. Matthews is the only guy of the superstar cohort this time around who did that. He did the 4x13, and he's going to have an opportunity to cash out. And it really depends. If Connor wants to keep doing 3-4 year deals, he's 28. You do 28, 31, 35, you can really max out your earning potential if you want to keep adjusting for the rate of inflation and the increasing salary cap. So really, I think more than anything, he just wants to see what their plan is, because they definitely need to improve some things. They need to open up some cap space to make more moves. And once he has an idea of where things are going, I think it's simply a matter of how many years he wants, because he'll be as close to that max number as he would like to be.
Who are the potential free agents for this offseason, and how is the team going to handle that with the need to open up cap space being part of the equation?
So their big free agent this year is a restricted free agent in Evan Bouchard, who I had mentioned before. He has arbitration rights. He's 2 years away from unrestricted free agency. If the Oilers want to try and go along with him, it's going to be expensive. It's probably going to be north of 10, maybe even as much as $11 million per season, which sounds jarring at face value when you think about Adam Fox is only about $9 million, Cale Makar is something like $10 million, Quinn Hughes is in that ballpark as well. But now that the cap's going to keep going up $5 to $10 million every year, it's going to become more palatable a lot quicker. The other free agents include guys towards the bottom of the lineup: Kasperi Kapanen, Connor Brown, Corey Perry, John Klingberg, and Trent Frederick. Trent Frederick, they've been linked to as far as being close to a long-term extension, but that hasn't been agreed to yet. That number and that term is definitely a little concerning, but being that we don't know if the 8x3.5 number that's out there is accurate, I don't want to be unfair, but they have room to tinker around the edges here. They're going to be in what I like to call the bargain bin. They are going to be looking for this year's version of Nate Schmidt, like the Panthers signed last year. They're going to be looking for this year's version of what Connor Brown was 2 years ago, or a Kasperi Kapanen type. I do think Brown and Kapanen, and Perry for that matter, are all probably going to come back because Chris Knobloch really likes them to varying degrees. And as far as Perry, McDavid and Draisaitl really like having him as an option to play with as well. So I think all three of those guys will come in at under $1.5 million, which isn't particularly cost prohibitive. But one of Arvidsson or Evander Kane, maybe even as both, end up getting moved this summer. And that creates space. That's $9 million when you put those two together. And that's a sizable amount of space. Of course, you have to account for Draisaitl's extension kicking in, Bouchard's new contract, and whatever a new McDavid contract is. And I was doing the math earlier on the Locked On Oilers I recorded for Monday, and there's a world where they're paying McDavid, Draisaitl, and Bouchard like $43-44 million for just those three guys as soon as 2 years from now. And then at that point, you're talking about a very different roster, because to pay that much for that few players, it really means the rest of your roster's got to be close to perfect.
Yeah, not a lot of margin for error left after that. Look, the Oilers came so close the last 2 years, but one issue that a lot of people ask about is goaltending. Where do they stand with their goaltenders, and what do you think it looks like when the puck drops in October?
So all year, Stan Bowman was pretty adamant that he didn't feel there was an upgrade out there. And I think some of that is tied to what the cost of a supposed upgrade would have been. We know John Gibson has been linked to half of the teams across the NHL over the last few years, but a goalie whose stats are like 5 to 10% better than the tandem they're paying $3 million for twice the price, that's not particularly enticing. Kara Vejmelka was the goalie that intrigued me the most during the season last year, but Utah extended him long-term. Pretty much, if the Oilers don't want to run back Skinner and Pickard, which wouldn't be great for optics, even though it's probably the best they're going to do, they're going to the lottery ticket pool. They're going to Vitek Vanacek. They're going to Alexander Georgiev, maybe an Alex Lyon, someone who's been in tandems, has shown the ability to be good, but is more or less a depressed asset. I don't think you'll see the Oilers in the trade market for a goalie unless it's a restricted free agent where it's a lot of uncertainty baked into why they're cheap, because by and large, it's hard to get a good goalie. You know, it's very reminiscent of the conversations we have about quarterbacks, where there's not enough good ones to start for every team, let alone enough to have good backups for every team. And I'm not saying Skinner or Pickard inspire a whole lot of confidence, but you at least have the track record of, okay, they won't sink your regular season. They can play well enough to get you in the playoffs. Of course, they need better goaltending. You're not going to win the Stanley Cup with .895 goaltending. Skinner and Pickard, the worst save percentage for a goalie tandem to make the Stanley Cup Final since I think it was like 2001 or something crazy like that. So the Oilers entirely outliers in that respect as far as how they've gone about piecing together a goalie room. Unfortunately, I don't really see a world where they're going to be able to upgrade that position unless it's something really out of left field. If there's a young goalie that wants to change the scenery, or there's something just not on anyone's radar, but otherwise it's probably going to be Pickard and Skinner again.
If only one stays, who's more likely to be the guy?
Probably Skinner, because they've spent a lot of time trying to give him the runway to take this. And as much as you don't want to believe in the sunk cost fallacy, that's not the way sports teams operate. The Oilers are going to look at Skinner and say, we've given him 3 regular seasons. He's won 40 games. He was a down ballot Calder finalist as a rookie when he started on a week's notice, when they realized Jack Campbell was entirely untenable as a starter. And Pickard, he's a journeyman. You know, we talked about it coming into the playoffs. He only had 2 career playoff starts before this year. He had a nice run in the playoffs, but he's a backup. He's a career backup. He's one real season as a starter was like 9 years ago. Had to go to Europe, come back 2 years in the AHL. He's not a bad backup. If you're a good team, you can get by with him, but you don't want to be dependent on either of these guys.
Any other priorities this offseason in Edmonton?
They need to find another top 6 winger to complement McDavid, Draisaitl, and Zach Hyman. And I don't think it'll be Evander Kane, just because they probably feel it can get cheaper, and they're just tired of the penalties. As good a player as he is, he took entirely too many penalties and lost his cool way too often. And last year of a deal, enticing skill set, limited no trade, so he can be traded to, I think it's 16 out of 32 teams. And he's got a skill set that teams on the fence kind of value a lot, where playing with that edge, the willingness to fight, to mix it up. He's not a depressed asset. they will get something useful for him. So a replacement for Evander Kane is probably my big answer. Unless they think it's Matthew Savoie, or if it's, because I really don't think it's Kapanen. I don't think it's Podkolzin. I don't think it's a full season of 40-year-old Corey Perry. It feels like they're a forward away, and that's before they subtract Kane or Arvidsson or both. They might need 2 top 6 wingers going into next year, which is all the more daunting when you think about the other work they need.
And the salary cap limitations that they have. So, all right, Nick, going to be an interesting offseason. Why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Be sure to check out Locked On Oilers on all the major podcasting platforms and over on YouTube. You can follow me on social, on Twitter and Instagram. It's Nick Zararis. And then on TikTok, it's Nick Zararis Sports.
Thanks a lot, Nick.
Thanks, Gil.
Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at Wonderful Pistachios. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no shells variety. It's the perfect grab and go snack for busy days. Whether I'm snacking at my desk, on a road trip, or just need a quick protein boost, they're always my go-to. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. So get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. That's wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more.